I'm Batman.
I know what you're thinking. Haven't I done this before? And the answer would be, yeah, actually, kind of improperly. Because when I did this back a while ago, I ranked the live-action adaptations from the Christopher Nolan trilogy to the original 4 movies, and I think I included the 1966 Batman movie in there, so I did just those 7 live-action adaptations. Today, we're going to take a look at the 13 live-action theatrical Batman movies that came out. This is specifically ones that are more, obviously, just Batman solo movies, so no Ben Affleck movies on here, Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, not because they suck or people think they suck, it's just because he didn't have a solo movie, and although most people would say that Batman vs. Superman is more centered around him mostly, it still doesn't count towards solo movies. So basically, obviously, we're going to take a look at the original 4 from the Nolan trilogy to the 66 Batman, and even throw in the Lego Batman and Batman Mask of the Phantasm, because technically it was a theatrical release, and the original movies from the 40s, which not a lot of people know about, and boy, you're going to learn a little bit about them right here, as the worst one at number 13 is this one. Look, when we talk about these adaptations of Batman, especially this 1943 movie here, first of all, it's 3.5 hours of nothing, and this is back when Batman was first starting out in the comics, so they didn't really have a whole lot of source material, and instead of using his villains that he had at the time, they just kind of go with this weird and wacky plot, and it is so racist to the point where I just don't know how you can sit through this movie and be entertained. Like, you have an American man playing a very stereotypical Japanese character who's a bad guy. They use the term Jap a lot. They're just... It's so blatantly racist, and I get it, for the time period it was made, maybe it wasn't, and this movie was made around the time World War II was going on, but it just... Like, I couldn't tell if they were going campy with this, or if they were going somewhat dark to 1940s level. Like, I have no idea. And plus, Bruce Wayne just doesn't feel like Bruce Wayne at all. There's this scene where Alfred's just sitting there reading, and Batman and Robin, who are coming out of the Batcave having just obtained the bad guy's ray gun, prank Alfred by shooting the gun toward him, hitting a vase and scaring the shit out of Alfred. I'm like, that's not Bruce Wayne. Maybe Dick Grayson would think about doing that, but Batman is not one of those people that fool around. Like, this doesn't seem like it's a guy out for vengeance. This just seems like the plot to Kick-Ass, where it's like a guy's like, we need superheroes out here, so he dresses up as a superhero, not really knowing what he's doing in the beginning. That's what this movie feels like, and my god, it drags, it's boring, and just awful. Then we have Batman and Robin 1949 edition. That's right, bet you didn't know there was actually 2 Batman and Robins. This is technically the sequel to the one that I just talked about, featuring different actors. It came out 6 years later, and this one also doesn't really use any of his villains out at the time, which at this point, Batman was about 10 years old and had a slew of villains, so you could have tried, I guess, but they didn't. Less racist, but still racist in a way, again, but the time period it was made in, nobody really cared at that point, and the acting is just suspect. There's really nothing to say. It's like the original movie. It's long, and it doesn't really grab your attention at all. Like, okay, maybe it's just because they're older movies, but like, I literally have no idea what the fuck is going on through any one of the first 2 original movies. It just... You get confused, and then you get lost, and then you're just completely out of it, like, midway through. Then we have Batman and Robin, 1997, the last of the 4 original films, the last one with Joel Schumacher, and look, I say this all the time, Batman and Robin is still like a guilty pleasure go-to movie, I think, when you talk about wanting to watch a comic book movie that is just bad and campy. This is the one. It's ridiculous to a point where it makes you laugh, so you actually want to watch it a little bit. Because let's be honest, there's not a lot of superhero movies like this anymore. Even Marvel, who still tries to keep their movies family-friendly, does not do stuff like this. Like, this is just completely, like, it's like they're trying to bring a full comic book to life, and it just... obviously falls flat with the bad puns, the star-studded cast. I really don't think George Clooney was that bad of a Batman. It's just the script really just got a hold of him and said, you're gonna fail, just because the script was bad in itself. And Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze was a good concept, but again, did we really need that many ice puns? We did not. And even Uma Thurman, I think, overshadows some of the other stars in this movie with her Poison Ivy portrayal. She gets that, kind of feminine just likability down to, I think, like a T, and does a good job with what she was given. So overall, when we're talking about the well-known Batman movies, sure, this one is the worst, but we all kind of have a soft spot for it, just a little bit. This one might be a little controversial, but at number 10 I have Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the animated 1993 movie that hit theaters. This was based off of Batman the Animated Series, and aside from Tim Burton's movie kind of going through Bruce Wayne's origin, none of the other movies went this deep into it. It kind of shows you Batman training through the process of becoming Batman, to actually having a girlfriend that he was going to go steady with at one point until she had to leave because of her father's death and her ties with the mob. And again, I think Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill reprising their roles as Batman and the Joker, doing a great job there with their voice acting, was fine. But I don't know, this one just bores me a whole lot too. Like, I like the fact that they're bringing in this new character that we've never seen with the Phantasm, and the twist finding out that Andrea, his old girlfriend, was the Phantasm herself is pretty interesting. But for the most part, I just remember when I was young sitting back and watching this and going, no, I just don't really like it that much, and to this day it's still the same with me. Like, maybe I'll go back and watch it occasionally just to kind of remember things from it, but other than that, I don't really see myself going back to it often. Another controversial one, but I have The Dark Knight Rises sitting here at number 9. I keep telling people the Christopher Nolan trilogy is great until you get to the third movie. And as I mentioned with the Batman, it's not necessarily the runtime, it's the longest of the Nolan films. The reason it's not really that great is because it's a long movie that drags on for way too long. Like, it's not that I have a problem with long movies, but when it feels like it drags on, you lose me. And with this one, they kind of had to change everything, because for the trilogy, obviously, with the Joker not dying and the Dark Knight being taken to Arkham, they were planning on Heath Ledger to reprise his role and kind of do a whole, Arkham Asylum thing. As a year after the Dark Knight, the video game came out, and I guess they were going to try to adapt that into a movie and give Christopher Nolan this epic finale. But sadly, Heath Ledger passed away before the Dark Knight came and hit theaters, so that idea at that point was out of the window. And with Bane being the main villain, I've said this before too, Bane just doesn't scream main villain to me. He always seems like he's secondary in my eyes. Like, he's interesting, but he's not interesting enough to be a villain. And Tom Hardy's take, sure, I like the fact that he's not getting juiced up on venom. It's actual medicine that he's taking to, I guess, keep alive and being able to breathe. But that voice, man, that voice, I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but I remember first hearing it, and I laughed my ass off in the theater. I was like, what in the fuck is this? And why is Tom Hardy doing that? Like, I just don't know. I get what Nolan was going with that story, but then there's that whole Robin thing at the end, too, that just kind of was thrown in there for the sake of, I don't know, Christopher Nolan saying, technically, my universe has a Robin, but it came after Batman retired, and he gave, like, the coordinates to Joseph Gordon-Levitt's cop character, who then we find out his real name is Robin, which, again, is just stupid. You had 3 different names you could have went with: Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, and Tim Drake, and yet you used none of them. You said that his actual name was Robin, and that, therefore, to me, is just stupid. So, The Dark Knight Rises always falls this low on my list, because when I like to go back and watch Christopher Nolan's trilogy, it's always the one that I look least forward to when doing so. But another thing that was good from this was Anne Hathaway's portrayal of Catwoman. It was definitely different from the other adaptations we had at the time, and it felt more realistic, so at least there was that. Then at number 8, we have Batman Forever. I can already see the comments. You enjoy Batman Forever more than The Dark Knight Rises? You know what? Yeah. even though Val Kilmer to me is still the worst of the live-action Batmans, there's something about Batman Forever that just sticks with me, because it was the first Batman movie I remember seeing as a child. Like, I don't know if it was the first one overall that I saw, but I remember it was the first one that I watched just because I remember having it on VHS at some point in time, and I liked Jim Carrey movies for some reason back in the day. I still do love some of them, but some of the ones I watched back then, it was like, why did I enjoy that? And I saw that he was the Riddler, and I was like, oh, I like Jim Carrey. And then I saw Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, I was like, that's interesting. I like the Men in Black movies, so let's go, pop it in, and I enjoyed it. I think as a kid, when you get that mixture of Tim Burton's darkness and Joel Schumacher's more campy version, it definitely was interesting to me, because Tim Burton still had a little something to do with this movie. He technically got like a producer role on this somehow, and again, you can still see the darkness from his films carry over, but adding a more kid-friendly comic book aesthetic to it. And I think when you're asking for that aspect, and you see Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones, when they're doing the Riddler and Two-Face respectively, do a good job with doing what they were told to do with their characters. And this was also the introduction to Chris O'Donnell as Robin, which I've always been very up and down on with him as Robin, but you know, it is what it is. And like I said, Val Kilmer, kind of a boring Batman to me, and Chase Meridian just seems thrown in there as a random love interest. Like, it's not necessarily the greatest one I've seen, but I mean, hey, I'll go back and watch this one more often than not, just if I want to have fun and reminisce of my childhood, remember liking this movie so much. It just, I don't know, something about it just sticks more than others. Then at the halfway point at number 7, we have Adam West's 1966 Batman. Look, again, it's fun. I didn't really see this movie till I was 14 or 15. I had stumbled upon it in a comic store, not knowing that this existed. I knew about the show, but I never know that it actually got a full-length feature film. And to this day, I think what makes it great is that it's the only Batman movie to feature the entirety of Batman's rogue gallery. Okay, maybe the Batman did have majority of it, and I just like the way they incorporate all the bad guys into this, and Batman and Robin have to find new ways to fight and defeat the villains itself. And of course, a great cast again. You have Cesar Romero as the Joker, Frank Gorshin as the Riddler, you have Adam West as Batman, Burt Ward as Robin. It's a cool movie. I've never been one for the campier side of Batman, but I can appreciate this for what it is. It's historical, because I remember hearing, you know, some of my older family members talk about this, and they said, oh yeah, when this came out, it really brought out this feeling that maybe comic book movies can be something. Now, it was still part of when Batman was being made fun of, because now he went from this dark entity to more kid-friendly, but it kind of showed that comic book movies were on the up and up, and if you did them correctly and did them for the right audience, then you might have something there. Then at number 6, we have Batman Begins, the start of the Nolan trilogy. What stops this from being higher is that the movie does start slow a bit. Like, it takes a minute to get there, and I think the Ra's al Ghul twist is, like, we all knew what was coming there. I mean, having the Ra's al Ghul killed early in the movie, you just kind of thought that, okay, Liam Neeson, who is going by Deckard, is actually Ra's al Ghul. He is fooling Batman, and obviously they did the whole League of Shadows thing. That was pretty cool too. I think Christopher Nolan is the only one so far in the live-action adaptations to actually talk about Batman's upbringing with the League of Shadows and all that. Cillian Murphy as the Scarecrow, he does a fantastic job there. He really made me believe that he was insane. All in all, it's a really good start to the trilogy. Again, I think it just starts a little slow, but once it gets there, and it kind of sets up what's to come for the franchise overall. Then at number 5, we have the Lego Batman movie. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, this was a spin-off to the Lego movie that came out, 2 or 3 years before that, and I was not really expecting anything, because I knew this movie was going to be made for kids. It's a Lego movie, for God's sakes. But I was sitting there in the theater watching it with a bunch of 10-year-olds around, of course, because, you know, why would, I think at the time, 18, almost 19-year-old me think that a bunch of adults were going to go to a movie theater and see Lego Batman, even though my dad was with me too, so I guess, that answers that question. Just me and him. It was nice. It was breathtaking. I like the fact that they were able to throw in some adult jokes in there and kind of put more of an adult theme to it, while also having the kids understand the theme of the movie as well. It was very just well thought out, well put out, and it had just enough of that campy comedy for you to go, you know what, this is fine. This is fine for what it is. And I would like to see Batman in Lego form again. I think it'd be nice. Will Arnett, I think with the over-exaggerated, voice with him really makes it hilarious because it's like, oh, people make fun of it now when Will Arnett's actually doing it. And there's just other things too. And fun fact, Zoe Kravitz voices Catwoman in this exact movie, who would later have a live-action adaptation herself. So that was pretty interesting. I actually had no idea that she voiced Catwoman in this. I found this out like a week ago before seeing the movie. I'm like, wait, so technically she's already played Catwoman before. That's interesting. And she also tried out for The Dark Knight Rises as Catwoman in 2012, and she was told she was too urban, and they didn't want her. So that's kind of questionable, but is what it is there. This movie, so great, one of the highest rated DC movies ever, and for good reason. Number 4, we have Batman Returns, the last of the Tim Burton films. This one kind of gets lost in time for people who aren't necessarily big fans of the character, because I think this is the second lowest grossing Batman movie ever. Obviously still ahead of Batman and Robin, because even though Tim Burton in his first attempt was able to keep that kid-friendly comic book feel and mix it with his dark gothic style very well, in the second movie, even though still kid-friendly in places, you can definitely see the tone was a little more adult in this case. I mean, just the way Michelle Pfeiffer struts her stuff around as Catwoman, which, by the way, is still the best live-action interpretation in my eyes. Michelle Pfeiffer. Nobody's really impressed me as much as her. And, of course, Danny DeVito's Penguin looking, well, very deformed and round and just creepy overall, which I guess, again, was the theme that Tim Burton was going for. It definitely, I can see the reason why parents would complain, but in the end, Tim Burton already showed you in his first movie that the darker aspect could work, so why are you complaining about it now in the second movie? Mainly, I think it stems from Penguin biting that guy's nose in the movie and making it bleed profusely. That's the only scene I can really think of, because after that I'm like, is there really anything else that questionable in that movie? Maybe when Catwoman's trying to seduce Penguin and she's licking herself, and then she goes to eat his bird to be, or whatever, to get him to join forces with her. Maybe those scenes, yeah, but other than that, it's not really that bad. I would still let my kid watch it. It's a classic to me, and one of the best Christmas movies ever made, because this takes place on Christmas, and if we can call Harry Potter Christmas because, it has Christmas in it, and we can call Die Hard a Christmas movie because it takes place on Christmas, then by God, make Batman Returns a Christmas movie played every Christmas time, because it is a Christmas movie and will forever be one of my favorites. Then, of course, at number 3, we have Batman 1989, Tim Burton, the one that pretty much made comic book movies respectable and showed that with a darker tone they can work when done right. And Tim Burton obviously just does a good job here. Jack Nicholson was, I think, the key ticket to this movie, playing the Joker, and he does a fantastic job mixing the darkness with the comic book aspects. It just, he's the only Joker to date that had that long gun that he pulled out, and it was just a long barrel, and he's also the only one in the live-action adaptations to actually have the bang gun and all his funny gadgets, plus the acid flower too. I find that interesting that he's the only one that's done that as well. He just did such a great job with playing the crazy character, which he had done before as he was Jack Torrance in The Shining 10 years before that. So maybe those roles were just made for him. And then Michael Keaton, he was the one that people kind of doubted in a way, because it's Mr. Mom, really, this guy? But he did an excellent job, and to this day seen as maybe the best Batman, if not with Christian Bale. But for a guy who's done 2 movies and soon to be more, because he's coming back for The Flash and Batgirl, he kind of made Batman cool again, to where actors were like, you know what, I want to play Batman. If Michael Keaton can do it, I want to do it too. And now every time you play Batman, it's you've made it. If you're playing the character, whether it be live action or some animated adaptation, you've made it, because it's not often that you could say, hey, I played Batman, I'm Batman. It just feels so surreal, or at least I think it would feel so surreal. I don't know, I haven't played Batman yet. Maybe. Let's be honest, it's never going to happen. I'm never going to play Batman. Yeah, no, and I do like the fact, too, that this goes through a Joker origin story where he starts out as gangster Jack Napier, who we find out later in the movie actually was the one who killed Bruce Wayne's parents. So that was pretty interesting that Tim Burton wanted to kind of put a backstory behind the Joker, whereas most other adaptations we don't get one, or unless it's the Joker solo movie, of course you're going to get, more of a backstory there. But yeah, this one's just a classic 33 plus years later. Alright, these two are the ones that have drawn a lot of controversy, and I'll say this. The Batman, the new one that just came out, is number 2 for now. I want to give it 10 years to see how it holds up, because with my number 1 choice, which is... It's been almost 15 years since The Dark Knight came out, and people still talk about it. It's one of the most influential superhero movies ever. And don't get me wrong, with The Batman, I feel like it definitely will be somewhat influential in a way because it took this darker twist to things and actually felt new and original with the ideas that Matt Reeves had. So again, it's number 2 because it was great. It was definitely the best Batman movie we've gotten since The Dark Knight, but I can't crown it over The Dark Knight yet because The Dark Knight is so historic and so classic that people always reference it now. When you look, if it's not Jared Leto's Joker that people are doing, it's Heath Ledger's Joker and all this kind of stuff. And of course, the Christian Bale Batman voice, people tend to do that nowadays. It's just so different. And of course, Aaron Eckhart, I think, always underrated. When people talk about Two-Face, they never talk about his portrayal as much. It's everything you want with a Batman movie and more. I mean, so is The Batman. But yeah, when it comes to which one's the most influential right now, it's definitely The Dark Knight. But again, give The Batman 10 to 15 years and then we can revisit this conversation. However, I'll be almost 40 years old by the time we can start having that conversation. But maybe I'll go back to it if I'm still doing YouTube. Who knows? So yeah, that is it for ranking the 13 theatrical Batman releases from worst to best. You can tell me in the comments below your list from 13 to 1. How would you rank these movies? Or you can just say which one's the worst, which one's the best. Like I said, I wouldn't include the Ben Affleck ones because he doesn't have a solo movie. We're strictly keeping this to solo movies. One's more focused around him. So again, sorry Ben Affleck. That's it for me. Stay safe out there, wear your mask, get vaccinated, and until then, I will catch you all in the next one.
Now I'm always smiling. A little fight in you. I like that.
Then you're gonna love me.